people into who they've become. Our today's guest is Maxim Langstaff, a Grammy and Emmy-nominated writer, producer, and author of this Askew. Maxim's career has touched some of the biggest names 20th century's pop culture, from producing the making of Same Paper with Sir George Martin's Denver's concert to helping lead $100 million fundraising efforts of the Wildlife Conservation Society. But the moment that shaped him was much quieter than any of that. It was a decision to save an dog, a dog who would go on to become a character. First novel, a pleasure and honor. Have you on the show.
Hi, how are you?
Thank you so much. All the John Denvers, all the novels. Who were you as a young man, and what drew you towards anthropology and spelling in the first place?
Well, anthropology is an interesting field. I think I wasn't physical anthropology. I wasn't paleoanthropology. So I wasn't so much focused on digging up bones and
Yeah.
all of that. Although people are probably easier to understand after they're dead, but that's a different conversation. But it was more social anthropology, looking at how cultures and societies operate and work, and it's a great discipline because I studied a lot of the stuff of Native American indigenous peoples, and you get to understand humanity, what makes us tick, not so much what we do in terms of what we think we're doing with intentionality, but in terms of what's really going on in the big picture, sort of the third eye. So I was just very drawn to it. It was always very insightful for me. And part of that, I suppose you could argue that one of the things I learned through the process is that human beings don't operate from facts. We operate from belief. We believe something and we accumulate enough beliefs and then we call them facts. With time, and I think to a large extent, that's why we live in the world we live in today. And we live in a world of extraordinary possibility and an enormous amount of pain. And I think that it's because of our beliefs. And I think that when you start talking about beliefs, you suddenly realize that probably what makes human beings the most unique quality of us as people is that we are storytellers. Innately, we're storytellers. We make up stories all day long for ourselves and for others. And we love stories and we believe stories. And then, obviously stories are all about belief. And so storytelling, it just fascinated me. I suddenly realized that was the one most potent thing about being a human being that was so unique, not to me, but to everybody. I think most people don't realize that. Human beings are gifted storytellers.
Yeah.
And so it's our stories that we tell ourselves and each other that gives us the best insight into who we are and our journey in life. So that's sort of how those two intersect.
Social anthropology has to do with, digging up why people act the way they do it. This is really fascinating, especially when you just suffer extraordinary possibilities available and enormous pain too, owing to the fact that people live from belief other than living from fact. A whole lot to really get kind of a big here. An ox decade of working at the highest level and think, what did witnessing that much creative genius open up, teach you about what actually means endure?
Well, the interesting thing about, all the, you could say famous people I work with or the icons that I work with, it's you and I who make them icons. They don't look at themselves as icons, or the good ones don't anyway. The bad ones do. And, the worst thing you can do in this business is to believe your own myth. And unfortunately, a lot of people do. But a lot of people who are successful in the entertainment industry are successful because the industry has created them, has made them that. And then there are people who are successful in the industry because of their own genius that they bring to the table. But they don't see themselves Paul McCartney sees himself as a songwriter and a musician. He doesn't go around thinking to himself, "Oh, I'm Paul McCartney." He doesn't buy into all that myth that way. Neither did John Denver. That doesn't mean that we didn't, that we don't think they're icons, and so that we sort of put them up there and, idolize them or whatever you want to do. Mostly because their stories, again, back to storytelling, speak to us. As John Denver used to say to me, and I'd asked him what makes a great song. He says, "I can tell a song is a great song when it becomes yours." So it's bridge. It's this bridge between people. And the nice thing about music, of course, is it's unmediated. It's the only universal language. I don't care what your race is, what your politics are, whether you're a man or a woman, straight or gay, young, old, music will penetrate can always penetrate. And I think that as far as working with these kinds of artists, they're colleagues. They're just people like you and me. They really are. They get up in the morning and they have to brush their teeth, and they do all the things that the rest of us do. They just happen to have a gift or a quality, or they've discovered some aspect of themselves that they succeed at. And the thing for me about writing and what I do is I didn't grow up going, oh, I want to be a writer, I want to
Yeah.
be this or that. And so when I wrote my book Suscat, I didn't graduate from school thinking, oh, I want to be the next great, writer. I just wrote, and I loved, and I wrote more and more because I seemed to be pretty good at it. Not, I don't know if anyone else thought I was, but I love doing it. And you tend to gravitate toward those things you love to do, and you tend to love doing the things that you do well. And so it sort of happens organically and naturally. And I think, again, you could go back. I'll pick Paul McCartney again. You go back and look at where he started. And he said one of the most extraordinary things for him was the distance of the journey that he covered in his life. He didn't have any expectations of being a superstar. He didn't even want to be a superstar. He just loved to write songs, and he sort of couldn't help himself. And he seemed to be pretty good at it. So he started developing as young as the age of 15 years old. So I think that as far as storytelling and filmmaking, young people today tend to, when I grew up in the 19th century, I'm just kidding, but when I grew up, we read a lot of books.
Yeah.
Books were the primary thing. In school you read books. You read books you like to read. And now only 1 in 5 Americans certainly read books. So today younger generations tend to experience the world more visually, in the sense that they consume
Video
entertainment,
part. Yeah.
information visually. And so when I wrote my book, and what I'm trying to do is try to develop this into a film now. And the reason I'm trying to do that, people ask me, is because I want to reach younger people. I want to reach people under age 40, because I think what's in the book would matter to them. And how do you do that? Well, you can say, oh, you should read my book. It's the greatest thing since sliced bread, which is, that's not helpful. But you can put it in a format and deliver it into the marketplace in a way that people will be more likely to be able to receive it. So it's interesting because it's becoming ubiquitous. And the other thing that's interesting is that Hollywood has always been in control of that space of film and television, mostly. And nowadays, with YouTube and all that's going on in the world, it's breaking down. Anybody can make a film.
Yeah.
What would it cost a couple $100,000 or $1 million to do 10 years ago? Now you can do for under $1,000. You can do it. We have the
Yeah.
technology. We know how to do it. And I think it's wonderful because it's opening up all these new voices from places. So you can be in Zimbabwe and you can make a film about, maybe you want to make a film about nature or one of the national parks they have there, and a wonderful whatever, or your own culture. You can get it, you can make it, you can do it, you can download it, you can put it onto YouTube, and it can get everywhere in the world. And so I think it's good for the people of us who are receiving this stuff, because we're getting exposed to different people and
Yeah.
different cultures and different values. That's really important. And it's not just the limited world we live in here in America. We think the world is, I don't know. We just tend to think human beings are innately, self-oriented, and we sometimes miss the point. The only thing we have and the only value we really have in life, and the only thing that gives us meaning, is our connections to each other. And guess what? Guess the best way to do that? Storytelling.
Yeah. Technology has come into place and removed the middleman when it comes to creating a whole lot of stuff. And they just speak for them also to the fact that, the stories that were the best stories, the stories which every individual get to see themselves in there, and they could actually personalize it owing to what they experience, playing the kind of stories, relating it, and they see themselves in the pictures. And it's really amazing. And thank you so much.
It's not that anybody's story is better than anybody else's.
Yeah.
And my story is not better than your story. The problem is that for too long, I'm a part of a culture where I just listen to my stories and the stories of my type of people, or
Yeah.
people I know in a circle of people. So the nice thing about this sort of breakdown, you could say breakdown, I think it's a wonderful opening, is that now, rather than just listening to my own stories, you're sort of listening to yourself in a weird
Yeah.
way. I can now listen to your stories and your history and your background. Everything you do is completely different from mine. Wow, what a fantastic opportunity it
Yeah.
is for us to connect. We're connecting here now. Look what we're doing. Isn't it fantastic?
Who shaped you and ended up how? What were the circumstances in him, and what made you to take him in?
You're talking about my book?
The dog, yes.
The book, I didn't really sit down and say, I want to write a book. It wasn't sort of an ambition. And I think this is where people don't understand perhaps the difference between fiction and nonfiction.
Non-fic-
I'm not sure if there is a difference, but that's a different conversation. But the point being, when you're writing a book of nonfiction, you're writing about something and you're telling people something. So you're really talking at them. I want you to agree with me. This is my opinion. This is how the world is. Can't do that in a book of fiction because people will be turned off by it. You have to leave space for the audience to have their own
Yeah.
self-discovery, characters that you create. And so for me as a writer, I've been writing my whole life. I've loved
Mm.
writing, and I just was writing some stuff just with no particular purpose or reason. I just love to do it, and it began to form coalesce into this thing. And then you have to sit down at some point and use your craft, and you figure out, okay, well, I've got all this stuff, and how can I turn this into a coherent story? What am I? You suddenly discover yourself along the way what it is the story you're trying to tell, and it's a magical process. But most people, don't allow themselves to engage the process. And what I mean by that is they think they need to have all the answers before they start, or they need to be inspired before they start. You don't. Inspiration comes from the process. It comes from doing it. So just do it. Then the other people say, well, haven't got any ideas. My response to that is, then you're not alive. Go write about the tree outside in your
Mm.
backyard. Go write about your car. Go write about something. Go just just you're not connecting to the world if you have nothing to if you think I have nothing to write about, and you should take a look at that. But I think that all you have to do is be open to the world, and there's no right and wrong, and there are no rules. And the most amazing thing about being a writer, certainly for fiction, is it's very powerful. I mean, you decide who lives and who dies. You decide
Yeah.
they're going to go here, they're going to go
Yeah.
there, and who's going to be married and have sex with that. I mean, you can decide everything, and it's really funny. And you realize as you go along, wow, that person, that character's fate is up to you, and it's actually quite a responsibility.
Process. Yeah. This is
Yeah.
really amazing.
You can't wait until you're inspired to
Mm.
start. Just start. And where to start at the beginning? You don't have to start at the beginning. Start wherever you start. It was Ernest Hemingway, the great writer, who said, you know, bad writers think when they write their first draft of their book that it's pretty good. That's a bad writer. He said good writers know that the first draft of their book is shit. It's just not very good.
Yeah.
And the thing is, being a good writer is you to know that and allow yourself to go through the process of finding it and making it better. It's really like peeling an onion. I would guess my book probably went through 70 drafts. 70.
Oh.
Yeah.
Our
Yeah. Yeah.
studios SDGT prepare with Sir Jordans and made the most film histories of the big eyes of the man who have signed them up. What did that project teach you about legacy and that we choose to present?
Well, I think about legacy. Well, that's a very interesting question. I am. It goes back to what I was saying earlier. The Beatles didn't set out to create a legacy. A legacy is whether or not you do something, or I do something, or John, Paul, George, and Ringo do something that becomes a legacy is up to somebody else, and it is directly related to the power of the story, the power of your storytelling, whether it's in a song, in a poem, in a book, in a movie, whatever form it comes in. You're telling a story of some kind, and its power comes from the person who's receiving it. So you do something and people receive it and they just move by it, and it changes them and affects them. They're going to like it, and it affects and reaches a lot of people. Then it becomes a very big thing, and it may be perceived by everybody as a legacy type of thing. I think that the power of an artist, of any artist, and the way you define through what is an artist's job, what do they do? It's the universal through the particular. So John, Paul, and George and Ringo could only articulate things based on their experience, but they were students. They were students of everybody who had come
Mm.
before. So they were a link in the chain. And if you're not a link in the chain in whatever work you're doing creatively, I'm not sure your work is going to matter. It's going to
Yeah.
resonate at all. You have to be a link in the chain, and they were. And when you listen to the Beatles' music, for example, part of their legacy is the fact that they are more American than they are British. Their music and their musical heritage comes as much from Motown and the great black artists from the Mississippi Delta, the blues artists, as it comes from anywhere, probably more so. And so by taking in those influences, they sort of reinvented it, then fed it back to us in America. It's quite remarkable when you think about it. But I think legacy is the Beatles. What's unique about I don't think the Beatles story has ever been told. I think their legacy is born from the fact that they represent a moment in history And what is that moment? It's not just about, oh, these guys weren't the best musicians in the world. They may or may not have been the best songwriters. That's up to opinion. It doesn't really get us anywhere.
Yeah.
Whenever people talk about the Beatles, they talk about it in the context of the 60s, or they talk about it in the context of rock and roll. Well, what was going on? Will there ever be another Beatles? There will never be another Beatles. Of course there won't. But how did they come about? They really represent a moment in time where technology and creative genius and social change and business and industry collided in a
Mm.
perfect storm, and they happened to be there. It could have been somebody else, but it happened to be them.
Yeah.
And that's the story that's never really been told, where they fit in the bigger historical picture. And they are historical, and they will remain historical for
Yeah.
that reason, not because of their individual talents or this or that or the next thing, but because they happen to be lucky enough. And I think there's a lot of great artists in the world, but I think you not only and that we never hear of, we never know about. And part of that is it's hard. An artist needs to find their moment, and most artists don't. Some do, and those that do tend to become what we call superstars or icons or have a legacy. And the Beatles found their moment. They were just another, rock band or pop band, and a bunch of kids trying to figure something out, and they just happened to be doing it at a moment in time, bam, and it
Mm.
was a perfect storm.
Yeah, they learn from those before then. We're able to kind of put in the work that is being demanded.
I mean, the thing is this. Nobody ever made it on their own.
Yeah.
And if I were to give any advice to a young person, it'd be like, if you think you can make it on your own, you're an idiot. Nobody did. We all need angels. We
Yeah.
all have people along the way who help us, point us in a direction, give us a helping hand, give us some counsel, actually teach us, whatever it is. And the Beatles would not have made it without an enormous amount of support and help that they got. I mean, they'd been turned down by every record label in the country or the world at that time. And some strange guy named George Martin, who came out of classical music, completely different background, saw something in them. And nobody else did. And so, in a sense, the Beatles would not have made it without George Martin.
Mm.
And I think that none of us, I wouldn't, I stand on the shoulders of other people. I remember when I was interviewing and talking to Herbie Hancock, and I said, Herbie, how influential was, what's his name? Louis Armstrong. How influential was Louis Armstrong to you? He goes, well, certainly I never knew Louis Armstrong. He was dead before I was,
Yeah.
really anything. He said, but I wouldn't be here but for Louis Armstrong. Another, he said, the impact Louis Armstrong had on jazz, the impact he had on music, the impact he had, period, and the way he penetrated our culture and the impact he had obviously affected me in the way I was taught, the way I was trained, and the way I moved up through the system. So a lot of artists don't even know what their influences are, or how they're a link in the chain. But if their work doesn't reflect that on some way, shape, or form, whether you're a writer, whether you're anything you do, if you're a director and you're directing a film, if you don't know who David Lean is or Fleming, these guys, incredible filmmakers, then you probably don't have a good command of your craft. Nobody ever made it on their own, and you think,
Yeah.
well, I can do it better than anyone else, and I can make it on my own. I don't care what anybody else thinks, and I'm doing my own thing. There's no such thing as doing your own
Yeah.
thing. You're a product of your culture. You're doing something.
Mm.
Everything is formed out of that.
Or stealing like an artist and over time bettering everything.
For better or for worse, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It can be limiting as well as it can be, yeah.
Yeah. Raising efforts, conservation. What did the work reveal to you about the connection between storytelling and natural white world here?
Well, a couple things. I think that I don't think anything else matters but the environment. The water you drink, the food you eat, the air you breathe, everything that sustains our life and all life on this planet comes from the environment. And I think we as a species, human species, we're the only species in the world that doesn't matter. We don't matter. I mean, think of it this way. E.O. Wilson, the great sociobiologist, said, if all human beings went extinct tomorrow, nobody would notice. It wouldn't have any impact except the earth would heal. If all the mosquitoes and insects and bugs on the planet went extinct tomorrow, the entire planet would collapse, the ecosystem. So we think we're at the top. We think we're better. We think we know. And so we use that as sort of a way of separating ourselves from nature, as opposed to we need to respect and we need to understand that we depend upon the rhinoceros. We need the rhinoceros. We need squirrels. We need bugs. We need tigers. We need whatever it is. We need the birds, the elephants, the whales. They are our brethren. And for me, in many respects, I prefer animals. I think they're more evolved, wild animals. They don't operate from ego, and they're not storytellers. They deal in the real world. See, we're storytellers, so we make stuff up. We make whatever we want up. We'll say, well, we talk. Here's a good example. We talk about wolves. Wolves are dangerous. They're going to attack you and kill you. Wolves have never killed people. We kill more wolves every day than wolves have ever killed anybody. I mean, when you start to think about it, and I had an opportunity to work with some of the world's leading scientists at the Wildlife Conservation Society. It wasn't the direction I wanted to go. It wasn't my intention. It wasn't sort of, oh, this is what I'm doing. This is who I am. But I couldn't say no because these people were too prominent. Their work they were doing was too important. So I thought, well, I'll put my idea of myself on hold and go do this. And it's funny how one thing leads to another, because I wouldn't have worked with John Denver if I hadn't worked with the Wildlife Conservation. If I hadn't worked with John Denver, I never would have ended up working with Sir George Martin and the Beatles. So everything leads to everything else. And life, we think, well, I have an ambition. I want to be this. I want to go from here to here. Life doesn't work that way. It's you move in different directions based on happenstance. And I think success to a large extent for anybody is based on their willingness to allow that to happen. I remember I got some advice from a father who said, Max, stop worrying about what it is you want to do. Just go do something. It'll lead you somewhere. And if you have some sort of quality and innate something, it'll seep its way in. So I was always a good writer. I didn't know I was a good writer. I thought everybody was a good writer. But it's something I loved to do. So I just kept doing it. And whatever path I went on, and it was my anchor that led me to all these different places. And I landed with this book, which is my expression and probably my contribution. And I could not have done it if I'd sat down and said, well, I want to be an author and I want to write a book. Wouldn't have happened. Life is not linear. It takes you all over the place. And you enjoy the ride. Enjoy the ride.
So looking back, Abandoned Dog, most grateful about the decider and the person that.
One of the most important and pivotal moments in my life. The dog in the book was a real dog, and that was his name, Chemo. And I have never had a greater teacher. I learned all the things that matter most from my dog. I learned grace. I learned patience. I learned courage. I learned forgiveness. All the qualities that I have to work very hard at, and I like to talk about, and we throw these words around freely. But he had all those qualities inside of him innately. And I really learned the nature of love from this dog. I mean, we all want to be loved and we all think we understand love, but for this dog, and he was a very smart dog and very connected intuitively, most dogs are, just by being with him and watching him in the way he operated in the world taught me so much about myself and all that. And so when I went to write the book, animals show up in books all the time, and they sort of as window dressing or somebody's pet. I wanted this dog to be a character in the book. I mean, I had enough respect for my dog, Chemo, that I wanted the reader to, I think we all have a relationship with our dogs that are our animals. They're very important to us. I think, I've had members of my family die, and it's upsetting and it's disappointing. When the dog died, my God, I fell apart. There's no recovering from that. I mean, I look at the difference between my reaction. And I think, God, what's the matter with me? And I think everybody's that way, actually. Our animals forgive us, and we need a lot of forgiveness. Human beings, a lot of forgiveness. They don't judge us. They don't judge us. And all we do, human beings are judgment machines. You make 100,000 judgments every single day. You don't even know it subconsciously. Everything. I'm going to turn left here, turn right here, take the next step. I'll pick up that drink, eat that meal. Everything we judge. Animals don't do that.
Sanskrit during Miss are small than folk. What drew you to Sanskrit? Legend especially. What question did you want?
Well, that's a great question. When I started the book, I thought Sasquatch would be a great device. I thought, wow, this is great. Everybody loves Sasquatch, Bigfoot, everybody said, oh, this is really fun. So that was sort of it, nothing more than that. And I thought I could use that as a device to, through my story. But then as I did my homework and I started to study the subject, that began to fall apart. I began to realize there's something really unusual going on here. There's a real mystery here. Now, what is that mystery? That's a good question. I think there's two, really. There's a difference between Bigfoot and Sasquatch, which I talk about in the book, which comes through in the book, and I won't give that away. If people are interested in the subject, they can read the book. Hey, but I think that there's one of two things going on here. One is the question, is there a real biological creature called Bigfoot or Sasquatch? And I was able to do some research on some very real scientific studies and information, a lot of it. that's not out there in sort of the general pop culture world that we live in, and that takes this subject seriously and did some serious investigation. And it really challenged my sort of preconceived ideas that this is just sort of a silly myth. And that I find that kind of disturbing. It was like, my God, this actually is plausible. Sort of like Jurassic Park. And then I thought, well, I can disprove this. This is just, whatever. And so I started to go through a process of trying to disprove it. Like, I can prove that this is just a silly hoax. And I suddenly realized that disproving the possibility of the existence of Sasquatch as a biological creature was harder than proving it. What do I mean by that? Well, if you want to think it's a hoax, if you believe it's a hoax and think it's a silly thing, well, you've got to ask yourself, there must have been somebody dressing up in a monkey costume for 300 years, wandering around in the woods where there's nobody else around, hoping somebody would show up. And if they did, they're likely to shoot you dead. So why would you do that? And I mean, it just doesn't make sense. And it would have required a conspiracy that's going on for 1,000 years, and nobody's ever given up the ghost, given it away. And it would have cost hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars to sustain. So you start to think about this. So if that's not the case, then what is going on? I'm not sure, but it raises a very important question. From a purely biological, anthropological perspective, could a biological creature like this exist in the world today? The answer is absolutely yes. And science, the established academic scientific community will say to you, well, that's silly. If it existed, we'd know it. Well, that's not scientific. That's not scientific. And they dismiss it. And so it's never been really properly studied. The other question is, let's say it is a myth. The whole thing is a myth and it's a human construct. Then that's an even deeper mystery. What is it about human beings where we have a need to invent this thing or create it? What is it this creature does for us that's so important? And the very opening of my book, I have a quote from the extraordinary scientist, Dr. George Schaller, and he says it point blank. He said, look, human beings need to find a connection to nature. We want that connection. We want to connect to know where we came from and who we are. And Sasquatch, Bigfoot, whatever, gives us some kind of a embodiment of some idea of the possibility of being able to find that information out, find that truth. So if it's all been made up by human beings, I think it's living proof that we're all cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, but that's fine. So I find that it's an enigma either way, no matter how you look at it, that needs and should be taken seriously because we obviously as a species are deeply affected by the idea of it. It's been going on for thousands of years. And if it's for real, boy, that would imagine if Sasquatch or Bigfoot, walked through your door and everybody had discovered it, it would be a disaster. It'd be a disaster. It would upend every religion because we think we're the only one. We think we're it. We're not prepared to let anyone else play in our humanoid sandbox. So it becomes a very, very complex question. The book sort of takes it on, and it's sort of a fun adventure.
What was the hardest part of writing your first novel about life working in other creative media?
It's a business of rejection. You're constantly told you're not good enough. It's
Yeah.
not good enough. We're not good enough. And I've learned over time that usually means you're onto something. We're in a professional pop culture field where somebody comes up with the newest, latest, the slickest thing, and everybody goes chasing after that, and everyone tries to copy that. When I see that going on, I immediately go the opposite direction. My whole career has been about going the opposite direction because that's where the opportunity lies as a creative person. Don't do what everybody else is doing. Do your own thing because if everyone else is already doing it, it's already done. We don't need more of that. We need you and your own voice. So it's very hard to find your own voice in the creative process and not be distracted by everybody on the outside saying this, that, thing. It's very hard. And Bob Dylan commented about songwriting. He said, you don't want to share the songs that you're writing too early because it's a very delicate process.
Yeah.
Because it's a very intimate process, and it can be squashed so easily by the outside world. So rejection is a big part of the entertainment field, I suppose you'd say, and it's tough. It's very tough, and it's unfortunate. I think there's an awful lot of very, very, very talented and creative people out there. Probably we've never had more than we have today, and they can't get arrested. And part of it is their own fault on some level, and that they don't understand that they're going into a business. My job as an artist is to communicate. It's not good enough for me to have an idea and think that I'm good or think that this is an important story, whatever it is. I need to communicate that. And so the degree to which what I do resonates with you is the degree to which I'll be successful.
Yeah.
And part of doing that, and if you want to actually reach people today, given the world we live in, unfortunately, you have to know the business that you're in. This is a business. So for everybody that you have your creative work and you give it out to the world, you give it out through an industry or a business. So you need to learn the business, not just you have your craft, you have your creative work, learn the business. You're in the music business, you're in the TV business, you're in the film business, you're in the book business. You need to know the business. There's so many incredibly talented people, just so much great creative work. They didn't do their homework. They didn't learn the business. They don't know how to communicate with the people who want their content and need their content, and so they never get to discover their content. It's much harder
learn the
today.
business.
Much harder today than it was 20 years ago. Much harder.
Learn
Yeah.
the business and business hard, but learn the business and being able to communicate to the audience who are looking forward to it. Yeah. Thank you
Right.
so much, Mazen.
Yeah.
So lastly, what readers take away from Sanskrit history, the unexplained, and the deeper questions about identity and nature?
Well, a couple of things. One is I think that in the biggest picture for what it is for me is really all I can say is that you're not alone. You're not alone in this world. We have much more in common with each other and with nature and with other things. And so gratitude, respect is how you're going to find joy. And I want people in my work, when I do all my work, I want people to have some joy and fun in their experience of it and maybe come away with some small amount of insight. And I think the insight for me in this book, and I wrote it toward the end of the book, it just literally came out. I wasn't intending it to, in a sentence that somebody stated, one of the characters. And she said to my lead character, this wonderful Indian woman, she said, all you can do in life is follow your heart and listen. So to me, that was the big lesson for me in all this.
Amazing. Yeah. Get it started. Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much, Mazen. This has really
Thank you
a
for
whole
having
lot of
me. I've really
insight.
enjoyed it.
And thank you so much for
It's
sharing
great.
your heart to making of me.
Thank you so much. Thank
So
you.
for my audience who would love to
Talk to you.
connect, follow you, get the book and follow you on various platforms, how can they reach out and where's the best platform?
The best way to reach out, if you want to reach out to me, I'd love to. I'll respond to anybody. But you can go to the website, my website. It's either maximlangstaff.com or go to Susquet, SASQET, thebook.com, and you'll find out all kinds of cool stuff and fun stuff. And we have our own podcast channel, and it's all fun. Thank you.
It's your career. Yeah, your story is a reminder that some of the most meaningful chapters of life is not the one biggest name attached, but the quiet ones, like recruiting or rescuing a dog who needed someone to show up for him. From the Beatles to John Deere to the wilderness that shape your own character, you are a proof that curiosity when become one of the most sacred adventure of life and hope. Once again, it's a pleasure and honor.
That's a great comment you made, because the reality is, someone said to me, what is the biggest key to your success? To me, I'd say it's my curiosity. You're a curious person. Curiosity will be your key to success. That's the only thing you need to have. Just bring your curiosity to life, in your life and what you're doing, you will succeed. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.